Hi, everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chat for today. It's March 7th, 2024. I am joined by my colleagues, Lily and Nathan, who are the program chairs for the IC TIG, which is the Independent Consulting Topical Interest Group for the American Evaluation Association. We're going to have a conference in Portland, Oregon, as you can see on the slide here in October. And this session, I'm going to pass it off to them in just a second, is meant to encourage people and provide some feedback and some ideas about how to create a proposal abstract for consideration for the sessions that will be selected for the conference. So with that, I'm going to let you guys take it away, and I'll put myself on mute and I'll pay attention to the chat. Go right ahead, guys.
Thank you, Matt. My name is Nathan Browning. I am an independent consultant based out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I am the program co-chair second year for the IC TIG. My job is with Lily, who I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. Our job is to essentially coordinate the application process for submitting conference proposals for the TIG, and then reviewing those and coordinating the peer review and all that fun stuff. So Lily, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Lily Sussman. I'm also an independent consultant, and I'm based out of Missoula, Montana. And I'm excited to this is my first year serving as your program co-chair. And I'm going to let Nathan get started, and then I'll chime back in a little bit.
Excellent. So we have prepared for you all just some, this is a lot like process oriented, like what's the nuts and bolts of submitting to the conference in Portland. Topic this year is amplifying and empowering voices in evaluation. I know not everyone loves the different words, and especially empowering, I think, comes with a lot of baggage, but that's the topic. We don't get to fuss and complain about it anymore. So we got to work with what we got. So some of our goals for today are essentially to encourage and support those of you that want to submit to the conference. I think we have a really unique TIG and a really unique positionality, especially for this topic, that we wouldn't get from other TIGs. So really want to encourage and support that. And then we also want to collect peer reviewers. If you're not, so committed that you want to write, but you think you are a good judge of what we should be doing, what we should be presenting on, we're always looking for peer reviewers for these abstracts. So we'll put out the link in the chat as well for how you can. Lily, if you want to grab that and put that in the chat while I'm talking, that would be amazing. And we can collect your email and get you signed up to be a peer reviewer. So we're going to do this by reviewing the selection process for how proposals get selected to be part of the conference, and review the actual submission process, like the portal, the key decisions that they ask you, a lot of the questions they'll ask, things you can do to bolster your chances of actually being selected and to be in the conference. And then give you that opportunity to sign up to be a peer reviewer if you're not ready to take the full plunge. So this is the general overview of the process. This year, our deadline is March 22nd, so just a few weeks away, right there at midnight. And essentially, so we'll submit this is kind of after the proposals are submitted. We have reviewers that are already identified. Those are due around the same time as that 22nd date. And usually you get assigned like 5 or so. It depends on how many people sign up. And you may also have to review things from other TIGs if they don't get enough. So it's a little bit strange how they do it, but usually around 5 proposals, and it's not super intense. You just read the abstract, however long it is, usually a paragraph, maybe 2 or 3 at the most. And then you'll rate things based on relevance to the conference theme, relevance to an AEA member that would be at the conference, like how well it would appeal to an audience member, relevance to the TIG that it was submitted through, and then the technical quality and the innovativeness of that proposal. Then, once those reviews are done, those rankings will be sent to Lily and I and all the other program chairs throughout the AEA around April 29th. That's the approximate date that they gave us. And we will go through those ratings and try and pick, following those ratings, try and pick a good slate. And we'll have to do things like combining sessions potentially, for papers and multi-papers and stuff. A lot of that happens behind the scenes. But I will say that we did learn from AEA that they assign TIGs an allocation of conference slots. This is what they said. They based on this past prior data of attendance at sessions for that TIG. So that is how we get a number of sessions or slots allocated to us, and we have to pick which ones fit into what we are given. And so once we do that, we submit our selections to AEA, and barring everything goes well, then we will have a slate of independent consulting TIG topics at the conference, with some of you potentially presenting if everything goes well. And just to reiterate, we usually have more proposals than conference slots, not by a lot. Last year it wasn't by a whole lot, but we did have to eliminate some. And even if your abstract is eliminated, it's a good opportunity for an IC topic chat. Just throwing that out there. So this is the content that they require you, and this is a big sort of overview. We'll go into more detail as well, but they ask you for a description of your proposal. This is the abstracts, the title, the category, what it fits into, who's part of this, all that fun stuff. Then it goes into how it aligns with AEA elements, including the guiding principles, the competencies, the type of audience that you're anticipating would come to this or would benefit from this, any TIGs of interest. They actually rescinded doing it by track. So you'll select the TIG in the conference portal or in the application portal rather than the track, which is a whole other thing. We've talked about tracks later if you have questions, but the takeaway is don't be too worried about the tracks. It's mostly a marketing and communication tool for people at the conference rather than something we need to worry about in the back end. And then they have a bunch of other miscellaneous questions that we will talk about that help them assign different things or help them get blog posts for AEA 365, all that fun stuff. So we have some key decisions that we want to talk about of, what's the most important thing for you if you decide you want to submit for this conference. And number one is, how do you align your topic to the conference theme? So this is a criteria that they assess through the peer reviewers. They'll be reviewing how closely does this tie back into the conference theme. And you'll see a lot of the titles of past conference sessions are, very much in line with the title of the the title of the theme itself. And so putting that in there is always a nice way to align things. So that's a big key question is, and it might inform how you approach a topic. It might inform what topic you decide to talk about. There's a lot of good ways to, especially when the theme is usually pretty broad, and there's a lot of ways to approach it.
Hey, Nathan.
Yes.
Do you want to touch on, they didn't rescind tracks, right? They just, the streams, how they were originally saying they were going to do streams. So I think they're going to put tracks on in the back end after the submission process. So you just don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that right? Yeah.
So the tracks, basically, if you have gone to a past AEA conference, they organize by TIG the sessions. And so, the next slide shows you all the TIGs. So we'll show you that in a second, but it's a pretty overwhelming list of TIGs, and some of them kind of overlap and it's a little confusing. So they introduce the tracks or the streams, whatever they're calling them, to try and streamline the content areas of the TIGs into like a bigger group that's a little bit easier to digest for people that are coming to the conference for the first time or don't know what TIGs do what, all that fun stuff. So yeah, that's why we don't. And so on the back end, like in the application submission portal, they are not using the tracks or the streams at all. You're going to select your TIG that you're submitting through, and we'll still review through the TIG. We will not review as like a track because we were concerned. We asked this question because we were concerned because the IC TIG is pretty unique. And if we had people from, a leadership and governance TIG, I might have just made that up. Like there's so many that I don't actually know if that could be a real one. If we had someone from that TIG reviewing our IC, they might rate it differently just because, they're not an IC or so on and so forth. So that's the concern we wanted to address with AEA, and they had a lot of pushback about this idea of streams and that sort of thing. And so they're keeping it simple on the back end. And I think the utility of the streams is for at the conference when you're looking at broad categories like what do I want to learn about right now, or what am I most interested in? And then it's a way to filter kind of what you choose to go to or what sessions you want to visit. So yes, thank you for calling that out. I don't know, I don't think we have a slide dedicated to that, so it's good to talk about. So yes, aligning to the conference theme is important. And the second big question is, what is the TIG that you do want to submit to? It doesn't have to be the IC TIG. We are especially interested in topics that are relating to independent consulting. If you have like a case study with a client, that probably belongs better with one of these other TIGs. So there is some complexity we want to talk about as well for submitting to multiple TIGs. In the portal, you can select all that apply. Like if you want to select, I want to put it to this TIG and that TIG, because maybe it's like a co-sponsored session. We don't recommend doing this only because the communication process around the second selection is not very good. So for example, if the due date for us, Lily and I, to submit is, I think May 10th is what it was. We're not going to have an opportunity like that. We won't be able to send another TIG, the ones that we end up rejecting, until we submit to AEA. And by that time, that secondary TIG that you may have selected is already going to have reviewed the slots. So the TIG that's selected as the primary TIG is the only one that receives your submission. It only goes to that one. And then if they say no, then it can go to the other TIG, but it's on the program co-chairs of that TIG to send it to the secondary TIG. And frankly, I don't have a lot of faith that people are going to really do this. I know that the way the timing works out, it's just not organized well. So I really recommend just picking one TIG, gives you the best chance, even if it might seem counterintuitive. Well, I could do the second TIG, and maybe it'll happen. It's better to really formulate your proposal around a TIG and make it really fit inside there. So there's no shortage of TIGs to pick from. And I'll do one more just to finish up talking about this, and then I'll pass it over to Lily. So you can look, if you're interested in, maybe you don't know what TIG would fit the best, you can look at the past conference program. You can scan this QR code right now if you want to tune out and go look at what things were going on last time in 2023 at the conference. You can look at the TIG that you might think is a good fit and see what type of sessions they accepted last year. And then you can see how well your idea might fit in with those. This is also a way that you can see how many slots a TIG tends to get. Now, this is also based on apparently past attendance, so this might have changed depending on which sessions had huge amounts of people and which ones didn't, and so on and so forth. But that is another little indicator you can use. The rub is if a TIG has more sessions, then it's also probably more competitive, so more proposals. So I think the real benefit here is looking at what TIG is really the best fit overall. And with that, I will pass it over to Lily to talk about number 3 key decision.
Sure. So as you can see, it can be a bit of a maze to find the best strategy here. And this is another part of that puzzle. And basically, there's different types of sessions that you can choose to do. And it obviously does depend on your content and the best fit for it, but there also is different chances of submission depending on what you choose. So for example, birds of a feather have people done that before? I'd love to also get, when we go into discussion, we can have you guys share your experiences, because I think a lot of you guys have actually been to the conference a lot more than me. But Birds of a Feather is just a big room with tables and people are sitting down, and you bring basically a topic to discuss. And it's a lot less formal than some of the others. So my understanding is for Birds of a Feather, it's very likely that if you submit a topic for that, it'll be selected. Same for Poster, same for Ignite. Ignite is I believe, just 5 minutes, and it's timed. So there's, the slides progress at 15 seconds per slide, and it's a very Ignite, very fast. So that's another option where you're going to have a higher chance of being selected. Whereas if you do one of these ones in the bottom, there's it's a lot more competitive. And part of that is as the TIG, as each TIG, we only have a limited number of slots for each of these. So even if your presentation or even if your submission ranks really high, at the end of the day, we're just going to have a limited number of places for all of these places, these types. So you want to be really strategic in thinking about what you want to submit. And if you're, I just want to have something in, I just want to, have a chance to have something, maybe choose one of these 3 up here versus one of these ones could be a lot harder. And yeah, I see in the chat, it looks like people had fun with Ignite in the past. And I think, Nathan, was it that the multi-paper, we actually we haven't had a spot for historically? I don't know if anyone wants to chime in for that, but.
We got one. We got one last year. So if you submit a paper, it's gonna, into the IC TIG, it's gonna become a multi-paper. And if we don't have relevant papers to combine with each other, which thankfully last year we kind of did, it might take really tangential strings, but if you don't have that, then your paper will probably be rejected. I don't know if AEA is doing any solo papers at all, if it's only going into multi-paper.
Yeah. And Think Tank, I believe, is talking about one topic. And I just put in the chat, there's a list that explains them in a little bit more detail. But I believe it's, getting really deep into a topic. I don't know if anyone has done that one before and wants to comment on that briefly. I see this as a discussion for our TIG to come together around this. And, it doesn't have to just be me and Nathan talking. Anyway, think about it. If anyone has been to that session, Liz, did you just unmute? Yeah,
I did. I was just going to say I participated in one last time I went, and it was really hands-on, facilitated, started as a panel with some content and experience and expertise, but then posters all around the room, small groups circulating, and then coming back to reframe and wrap it up. And I thought it went deep, and we all got a chance to interact in a whole group as well as small. It was really refreshing. I think Nina Zavari and colleagues put something together. It was about responding critically to RFPs that were vague or didn't have enough resource to do a equitable evaluation, something like that.
Fun. Thanks for sharing, Liz. I think that's helpful. Okay, so if we can talk more about this when we move into discussion, but definitely thinking strategically and thinking about who you can partner with for these is going to be a good move. And then, Nathan, can we go to the next slide? I was trying to click. Okay, so other information that's needed. So it's going to ask how your submission aligns to the AEA guiding principles, and I think we have a link in that document, Nathan. I don't know if you want to share that in the chat. But I believe this is not part of the rating criteria. They just want to know for their own record keeping where you align. And we can go to the next slide when we're ready, unless anyone has any additional questions or comments about this. Thank you. So then the professional competencies. So you can see these are the professional competencies. So, I think these are just things to maybe think through before you're presenting. And I put the questions, there's a PDF that has all the questions you're going to answer. So when you're doing your submission, you can just think through these things and have the answer, but you're just checking a box here. And again, I think this is more for them on the back end to know where this fits in versus a criteria that the reviewers are going to use. Nathan, doing great. So who is the intended audience? So again, this one is not that your submission is going to be weighted based on this. It's just, this one is more about who you want to bring to your session, who you're going to attract. So I believe they show this in the agenda. So you just want to think carefully about who you're trying to get to attend your session and, which of these levels they're at. So more for that aspect of things. Go to the next. So these are just other questions they're going to ask when you're submitting. So it's just about how you want to engage in the conference. So are you willing to submit a presentation as a poster? Are you willing to make it into a poster submission? And, if you don't, is it your proposal isn't accepted for one of the others, I guess this can be a nice backup. I think as long as they have room for posters, it sounds like they typically take posters, but say no if you're not willing to make a poster, because it is a lot of work sometimes to make a poster. First time submitter. I don't know how this one is actually used. I think this is also for the record keeping, but if anyone has additional information on that, feel free to chime in. Are you a student? Again, I think just for their own information. And then are you willing to write a future blog post? I think they're just always looking for this. So, they'll probably just add you to a list and you might be contacted in the future. And then willing to serve as a session chair and willing to serve as a peer reviewer for TIG. So this one too, we're asking you to directly sign up with us if you want to be a peer reviewer, but you can also sign up here and you'll be on AEA's list. At the end of the day, Nathan and I have to submit a form of who has signed up with us to be peer reviewers, but then we'll get back from AEA, like the final list of reviewers. So we could also have people who are from other TIGs as part of the reviewers. So again, you could sign up here and you might end up, reviewing with us, but you could also be reviewing for another TIG. And a session chair, I think that's just, oh yeah, I didn't go ahead, but that's fine. But I think a session chair, right, there's just some sessions where they have moderators and have people involved in organizing the session. So again, if anyone has any other information about that, feel free to chime in.
Well, Liz Martin asked in the chat, who chooses the session chairs? So we ran into this last time where we had to create the multi-paper out of 2 individual papers. And so for certain sessions, it'll ask you if you have a chair that you want to pick. But sometimes if, we have to like change, what the session is, or we turned into one that has a chair versus one that doesn't, or like where the original submission did not have a chair, things like that, then we'll have to go and find one, especially for the multi-paper. So we did have to go and find one for that multi-paper. So if you do submit a paper and you have people in mind for a multi-paper that you would like to chair, I would include it in the abstract. That's a pretty like niche situation, but otherwise the session chairs, I believe, gets asked. It depends on which type of session you choose to submit.
Thanks, Nathan. And yeah, Bijan, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. Please correct me. But yeah, the audience question seems counter the principles of equity and connecting people across levels of experience, but anyone share topics they see as being relevant to one level and not another. I don't know if I quite understand the question part of that, but yeah, I don't know. Are you able to select multiple levels? I'm not sure. Or do you have to select only one level? Because that's a good point. I mean, things are relevant and we don't want to only have, it doesn't seem to align with the conference to separate people.
They do have an option for relevant for all levels.
Oh yeah, there we go.
But I'm not actually sure that they even advertise this. I don't remember actually at the conference. Anyone remember if they advertised this in the conference program?
It might be one of the search fields. When you go into the app and search, you might be able to search based on the level.
Mm-hmm.
I always check all because I want as many people in my room as possible. I just have that ego thing.
Okay.
Someone else good. Unmuted?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know if demonstration is one of the applicable categories this time, but I feel like that has been a category before, and that level might be, I don't see it there.
It might be even that we might have just forgotten to put it in here.
Maybe it's skill building workshop. That might be what it is now. And I think that's where levels might be quite applicable. Like if you're really looking to see if this is for my skills, like do I need to be at like an intermediate level at least in order to know what they're talking about?
Yeah, and thanks. It looks like we left off demonstration, which is I believe one expert going through like more of a philosophy or a theory or something that is a little bit more academic, for lack of a better word.
I believe Kathleen Sullivan did a demonstration of her RFP decision-making tool last year, that would be an example of it.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Great. And I'm glad I pronounced your name correctly, Bijan. Okay, so expectations for participation. Nathan, I was looking at what we did last year, and you actually did a very great summary of this disclaimer, not to put you on the spot or anything. I don't know if you feel like it's still fresh in your mind, but basically this is something that you're, go ahead, Nathan, you unmuted.
Was my great explanation that this is a legalese check yes that you have to agree to this? I think I talked about it a lot last year because there was some relevant conversation around copyright and who owns um the content or the product of Lily. I don't honestly remember much else what I said, but if you watched it recently, you might be able to speak better to it than I can at this point.
Oh,
But
no,
there was a
that's-
relevant conversation last year because there's a lot of concern about copyright, and there was something that AEA put out about like who owns the content of the conference and stuff like that. So that was a bit more of a controversy.
Yeah. Basically, you're not getting compensated for presenting in any way. Your fees are not reduced for the conference. You're just agreeing to this. It's still your intellectual property. I think, yeah, there was something around that last year. So anyway, you can skim over this and read, but if you want to present, you need to check it at the end of the day. And I don't think there's anything in here that's too surprising or controversial.
Before you post anything and you get really angry and start saying they're trying to steal my intellectual property, ask some questions from AEA first. That's my suggestion.
Thanks, Matt. So that's talking about, I guess, what happened a couple of years ago and a lot of confusion that happened around misinformation, I guess we could say.
Yeah. In general, I would say AEA, I think a lot of people assume ill intent sometimes with AEA, and I would kind of following up with Matt, I would always assume maybe incompetence is a strong word, but maybe like mistake or just didn't think about some of the consequences rather than the ill intent, like they're a bad actor coming for our copyrighted content and uh, our
There's that
material.
quote, right? Like never assume bad intentions for what can be assigned to encompass something like that, incompetence. I don't remember the exact quote.
Yes. Yes. It's
Anyway.
a razor, I think. Some type of razor, one of the razors. I don't know.
Okay, we can move on
Not a
because I want to
philosopher.
make sure we have time for discussion. So here are some, we want to have everyone brainstorm, discuss, share ideas. I think that's what we can do for the rest of this session. If there's any questions, that's great too. But these are just some questions to get us started. And some of these came from AEA's website and submission. They had these questions to think about when you're thinking about the themes. So I won't read them. I think we could just leave them up here for a few minutes and let everyone start to think about how we can uniquely speak to this theme as the independent consulting TIG, what we have to offer, how we elevate these practices in our work. And Matt, I see your hand has.
Yeah, I just put I put my hand up because I know I've seen a bunch of questions over the years and they're recurring questions. So I want to ask them and see what I think I can answer them, but that's your job. So I'm going to throw these out at you. So I actually heard this just the other day. What if I have a great idea for a session, but it does not align with the conference theme? I mean, it's a great evaluation concept, but it doesn't meet whatever the evaluation theme is. Should I be proposing that? What are your thoughts on that?
An opinion. It's not really I mean, it's a little bit informed by being program co-chair. I think if you can find a way that you think you could get the highest mark on the relevance criterion in the actual applications process, I think generally these themes are broad enough that you can find a way to connect it back, no matter what the topic is. And I think people do that. You'll see that all the time. You'll see sessions at the conference that don't really align to the theme. So I wouldn't say it's a hard no, but if you can't find a good way to connect it, it will hurt your score. So it might be worth waiting like a year or two for like oh yeah, this really aligns with this, unless it's like super time sensitive or something of that nature. That's my Lily. Did you have an opinion or others have
I
thoughts on
agree. I
this?
think everyone is probably a master at, thinking about how can you relate this to the theme. So just find a way is what I would say. If the worst case scenario, it's not accepted and you can do it in the future. But yeah, why not try to connect it?
Do you, this is a setup question. Do you think I should use the theme, the title of the theme for the conference into the title of my presentation? We see that a lot. Does that help or not?
Be more creative. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's kind of fun sometimes. Sometimes it's like a little forced. I think it is an opportunity for creativity. I think it also has easy points for the application itself. Um, so if there's like a fun way or like a interesting take on the title, I don't think it can really hurt you in this way. I'm sure there are other peer reviewers. I've been a peer reviewer before I was program co-chair, before I was really any leadership in the TIG. Um, and I don't really know if that affected my rating of things, but I definitely think it's little pieces of evidence that you are relevant to the theme, which is one of those criteria. So I don't think it can hurt you, but don't make it so boring. Don't just do it to make it forced. Like make it fun if you can.
Question for you with regards to posters versus doing a session. When does it make sense to just do a poster versus should I go ahead and put in a paper or one of the other session types and select the poster if needed option? What are your thoughts on whether if somebody came to you and said, I'm not sure if I have quite enough for a poster or if I have quite enough for the some sort of a presentation? How would you, what kind of advice would you give to a colleague on how to determine which of those two to do? Because I know oftentimes we do posters when we're first getting started or we're kind of teasing out an idea. What are your thoughts on how to determine the level of kind of submission?
I think it's a personal choice. I think if you feel ready to do another type of presentation, you should go for it. And I think the poster is a nice fallback option. So, if you think you can have an engaging presentation, if you think it's relevant to your peers, I would say, yeah, like be thoughtful about what you put out there because this, it is a competitive and well-attended conference and you're taking people's time and, spots. So make sure that you're being thoughtful. And, that's also the job of the reviewers to consider that in, the selection process. So if you feel like you have it, go for it. And, worst case scenario, you might just end up with a poster anyway.
It's my understanding that they put the poster option in there and they accept a lot of presentations that didn't get selected for the main presentation slots as posters because people cannot go to the conference and get support from their employer or their institution unless they have their name in the program in some way. And so the poster becomes an option. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say one thing of good about posters is you get a chance to talk with people. So if you have some, a paper session or whatnot, you're going to talk for 15 minutes and then 3 other people are going to talk for 15 minutes. It's been a while. I haven't been in a couple of years, and then the session ends or there's 5 minutes of group discussion and someone might not ask, someone else might have really interesting paper and get all the questions. So you might actually not get to talk to anybody about your paper. Whereas a poster, you have something very interesting. You're there for an hour or 2 or something like that. And you're there the whole time and people can find you and come up and talk to you about what you're doing. So that's one of the reasons I sometimes like posters is I actually want to engage with people and not just talk at them and and sit up on a panel.
It's a great point, Jason. Thank you.
And you'll be doing a lot of talking if you do a poster, I promise you. Whoops.
Another thing that kind of took me by surprise and I only figured it out a couple of years ago. A round table is not actually a round table. It's really a facilitated session where you kind of engage people with a conversation. I remember Anne and Susan did this, maybe it was 2018, 2019, and they had a round table and it was in a room and I walked in and we ended up having like 60 people in that room. It was a great session, but it was not a round table. If you want to do a true round table, the way a lot of us understand it, that's birds of a feather. And so what they do is they have these birds of a feather sessions and they have literal roundtables, and they have them all over this room, and they have them usually during a lunch is what they've done in the past. People would grab their lunch. It's kind of like a grab and sit, and you sit and talk about whatever it is. I think Margaret did it a couple years ago, and she had a true birds of a feather, and it was basically just a literal round table. You sit and talk about an idea. So I just want to make sure people know there's a big difference between a round table and a birds of a feather. Birds of feather is actually more of a round table in the traditional sense. Is that correct? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, the birds, it is a roundtable, but it's not as in depth as something like the think tank, because it's usually it's kind of like Ignite where you have to switch every 10 minutes. So they play a little bell after 10 minutes of being at the table, and you go to a different birds of a feather, usually in one big room, you know. And it is a round table, and it's usually like around a topic where everyone has a similar line that they're bringing to it. And I've had some really cool conversations, met some really good people at the birds of a feather, and they're fun and informal, not so. They are very noisy. It is very loud in there because there's so many people and they're all at the tables talking to each other. So it can be hard to hear. That is for sure.
Did you guys want to do the rest of this communication here recorded, or do you want me to stop the video now?
I'm okay either way, honestly. It might be helpful for people to hear some talk
Okay,
about
we'll keep it
brainstorming
going.
ideas.
Sure.
Yeah, so well,
My
and I'll say, can I say briefly, Matt, just
Of course.
these 5 questions that are up here. If you remember throughout the past year, it's been a while since the last one, but we had the 2022 TIG survey. And in that survey, we asked a lot of qualitative questions. I think there was a snafu about the qualitative session itself. I don't remember if we ever got around to it. But I did go through some of those like in a really brief way, not very solid methodologically. I have to say that because I know my audience right now. But I did go through and read some of those comments and try and pull out some of the major pain points that people said, because we asked, what are the biggest challenges for you in independent consulting? Um, and so I went through those, tried to find some of those pain points and try to connect them back to um, the conference theme in some way. And that's kind of where these questions came from. So, for example, one of the biggest questions or pain points people had is like, how do I manage my time effectively? Both, you know, in a lot of different ways that comes out. But, you know, one of the things that comes up is I have too much work and I need to subcontract, but I don't have enough time to actually go through the process of subcontracting or hiring or to however they want to approach it. And so that kind of made me think of the question in alignment with some of the prompting questions that AEA put out of this second question: how can an IC mentor and develop new or underrepresented evaluators? Or what kind of principles or guidelines shape your hiring or subcontracting decisions? Are they uplifting? Is there equitable practices that you incorporated into policies of who you subcontract with, who you hire, what type of services you use, professional services? Don't know if that would be a great conference topic, but I think the first part I think would be relevant for a wide array that is unique to independent consultants of like, hey, here's the type of policies you could bring back to your firms and that sort of thing. Um, so I'm curious. I would love to hear some of these if these questions spark anything for you all about, you know, what type of topics would be compelling, what type of perspective do we bring as independent consultants that is not going to show up in the conference if we don't bring it? Because in some ways, the independent consulting, the IC person as a unit is somewhat underrepresented in the evaluation world. And certainly we want to try and formulate our conference topics in such a way that we can uplift underrepresented. I was typing this in the chat and then I remembered that I had to forward the presentation. But when I did about a year ago, last year or something in the fall, actually October, we did, I presented one of the topics from the 2022 TIG survey, and we were talking about demographics, and it spawned this big, deep conversation about, do you need a PhD to become an independent consultant? And that question, you know, I thought of that today as I was reviewing these, And then the very last question there, how can we address barriers that gatekeep historically underrepresented and young evaluators from becoming ICs? There was a lot of good conversation about like, um, historically marginalized groups feeling like they need a PhD to be able to have that credibility or the status to feel comfortable and confident to become an IC. Whereas like those with more privilege were like, oh, I just did it. That's my position is I was told by some other evaluators like, hey, you need a PhD. But I didn't end up getting it. I just got my master's. So those type of that would be like I think a really good think tank session. I can't submit a conflict of interest, but I think these questions about like who are the ICs and how do we what's the benefit to being an IC and how do we not gatekeep these things? I just think there's a lot of really potential value that we could contribute to the conference in this way from our TIG. So I'm curious if you all have thoughts or ideas that you want to brainstorm with others. And again, if you feel like you want to share something but you don't want it recorded, we can stop the recording as well. If you want to put something out there and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about submitting about this," we can also stop the recording. Anyway, I'm word vomiting, so I'm going to mute myself so I can't anymore.
As everybody's mulling those questions over and they start to formulate their responses, I do want to make a statement that Nathan, Lily, if you see some sessions that you think should be out there in the public that maybe can't make it to the conference, or if you have an opportunity to present at the conference and you want a chance to present ahead of time, always reach out to these Thursday sessions, these IC topic chats. We get a pretty good audience. We get really great audiences for some topics that are particularly interesting. If data viz, we could have 100 people in the room coming to watch those sorts of things. So always consider these IC topic chats, these Thursdays at noon Eastern as an option too. I mean, I always want to push and stress the opportunities for the conference. It's a wonderful time to do it, but these are sessions that are pretty low barrier if you pitch a good idea, and it seems like something. I mean, frequently we do 48 sessions a year, so we usually will take most ideas for these Thursday sessions. So that's also an option for anybody who feels like they have a great idea and they want to get some ideas out there.
Thanks, Matt. Maybe do stop recording for these last like few minutes or so and just see if anyone else has any final questions, if that works.
All right, everybody in YouTube land, we'll see you later. Everybody live, stick around. And next week, I will be talking with Becky Garrow, and we'll be talking about getting paid. So join us next week for that. See you guys later, YouTube people. Everyone else stick around.